Welcome to the news for the week of 4 October 2020. John McAfee in trouble? Say it isn't so. Tenda routers, Egregor. Someone's going after Trickbot. The OFAC may come after you for paying ransoms. Maxwell's demon and the second law of thermodynamics. All this and Jason Wood on this edition of Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Do you know where your organization's crown jewel data is, whose data it is, what it contains, and if it's flagged, tagged, and classified accurately? Defense in Depth requires Discovery in Depth. At Big ID, they help organizations uncover dark data, classify sensitive and regulated data, meet compliance requirements, and take action for data on-prem, in the cloud, and everywhere in between. Learn more about how Discovery in Depth can change the way enterprise organizations find, classify, and protect sensitive data at securityweekly.com/Big ID.
Welcome. I'm Doug White from Roger Williams University. All right. First up, a report from 360 NetLab indicated that Tenda routers, which are typically Soho routers, so these are like you'll see these sold at a lot of storefronts, are being used to spread T-Tent, which is a Mirai-based botnet. So the Tenda routers had two different zero-day vulnerabilities: CVE 2018-14558 and CVE 2020-10987. So, and I always put those in the wiki. So if you didn't get all those numbers because you're driving and frantically trying to write CVE numbers, on a pad, that's probably not a good idea. So don't do that. They're in the wiki, so you can look them up. Basically, the first bug was allowing post-based remote code executions. So you could push remote code into those Tenda routers that had outward-facing capabilities. T-Tent itself has 10 of the Mirai distributed denial of service instructions embedded in it and 12 RAT instructions. So this is stuff that's pre-built into the version they were pulling off the Tenda routers. And it has 22 custom command and control commands that you can actually execute and use this to make it another pretty sophisticated framework which allows attackers to plan customized attacks. So basically the whole thing, so this whole T-Tent thing with the Tenda routers is a toolkit botnet that's going to allow sophisticated denial of service attacks. But just like all these other things that have been coming along over the last two years, all these different frameworks now are, set up so that they can quickly be repurposed to do other things, to have other payloads. And because this thing has all those command and control instructions, you could actually use it to download just about anything. So this is one that's probably going to be out there, even though it was just on these Tenda routers now. That doesn't mean it can't be used other places. So keep an eye out for T-Tent botnet. Florian Roth and Ollie Whitehouse released a vaccine that they called Raccine, I guess, or Raccine. I don't know. Isn't that a place in Wisconsin? But it's basically, it's going to deal with some of the components of ransomware. So this is something I had been looking at a lot lately. The particular tool that they have is an executable that you can get from GitHub, and it primarily focuses on this infinite series problem that I talk about all the time. I mean, I'm sure I've mentioned it before, but basically the idea that phishing attacks are infinite series, so if an infinite number of monkeys are given an infinite number of typewriters for an infinite period of time, they'll all eventually type the number 42 or something like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, basically, my sort of take on this for the last year or so has been that even though phishing training helps and teaching people not to click the link helps and telling them that picking up flash drives in restrooms and sticking them into the system at work is not a good idea, and all that does work, it doesn't always work. I mean, so we probably have to at least in our addressing of this issue have to move on a little bit from the phishing initiation, because it just keeps happening. Somebody always clicks it. I mean, always. So this article reports on this GitHub post that basically provides an executable file which registers a debugger for vssadmin.exe and wmic.exe. So these are two really interesting services on Microsoft-based systems. And basically, they're often invoked by modern ransomware because what they want to do right up front is they want to erase shadow copies off the drive. So this tool basically is the first of a series of tools, and I'm actually going to talk about this tomorrow at a panel, and we're still talking about maybe if we can interrupt that ransomware cycle, which focuses on the first step being deleting shadow copies and or copying shadow copies somewhere else or moving them or doing any kind of thing to them. Maybe we could interrupt that piece of code and make them write better code. But this tool in particular kills off the vssadmin and WMIC processes if it sees something try to reach them. So if somebody tries to actually touch one of these processes, it immediately kills all those processes and they don't come back. So you would actually have to go and uninstall this, which this is what's in the article, in order to prevent these tools from deleting all your shadow copies. I think malware developers will probably have to, contact their app developers and start issuing patches to work around these types of changes. But this is the kind of stuff I think we need to be thinking about in dealing with ransomware, because we have to find ways to move beyond the click. And so what's the next parts of those kill chains, which is the title of my panel tomorrow. Egregor is a new ransomware strain that is reported to have infected at least 13 companies. Yet again, it's a framework. So it can vary the payloads that it delivers. It can vary how it executes. It can download additional obfuscated instructions and shellcode from a command and control server. So sounds very familiar to a lot of other things. And I have not really been reporting on all these different ransomware strains that come out because they're all pretty much doing the same kind of thing. But this is another one that caught my eye because of this. It threatens to leak your stolen data, and then it sends out automated alerts to all your clients and customers. So they go ahead and extract all that, and they send out an automated alert letting all your customers and clients know, hey, they've been hacked and all their data is being leaked. If only the company would pay the ransom to try to get you to pay up. The note, however, this is the interesting part. The note promises that if you do pay up, they will decrypt all your files and, here's the fun part, provide helpful recommendations for securing your company from this sort of attacks in the future. I'm like, okay, so the guy who robbed me is going to give me tips about how not to get robbed, which if it was me doing it, when you went to get the tips, I would probably give you tips that would just get you robbed again. Like, if you don't want to get robbed, like, come back down here at midnight tomorrow night with another $500, and that will probably keep it from happening. So, I'm not sure I would trust people to give me good advice. Probably need a new color for this type of red team black hat attack. I don't know. I'm going to call them burnt umber team. So, but you can pick your own colors for this. John McAfee, the founder of McAfee Security and all-around cyber guy, was indicted on tax charges now due to his failing to file tax returns from 2014 to 2018. Imagine that. This indictment was actually sealed back in July when he got arrested in Spain. So he was already under arrest, and he's sitting in Spain like every other hacker on earth, awaiting he's fighting extradition to the United States. So who knows if they'll manage that. But he's probably trying to get extradited to like Sealand or somewhere. And if you don't know where Sealand is, you can look it up. But it's kind of a famous place on an oil platform, and you can get citizenship and stuff there. I think some rock stars did that. But anyway, the indictment was revealed after he got arrested, and so now as he sits there waiting extradition, the general claim is that he was using cryptocurrency to try and hide his income from the government. Imagine that. He apparently was earning millions and millions of dollars during that 4-year time period, but he was mostly redirecting his income and his property into various bank accounts and cryptocurrency wallets that were not in his name. So he was putting, I don't know if they were fake names. The article said something about other nominees' names or something, and I wasn't really sure what they meant by that. But all of his property assets were held in these other names and so forth because he was trying to avoid the Internal Revenue Service in the United States. As famed gangster Al Capone learned, crime does pay, but it does also pay taxes, or, then you've committed more crimes, which means that, well, I guess you end up in prison, and maybe a percentage of each crime should be set aside to pay your taxes. I don't even know if I'm sure there's a form for that at the IRS. I mean, if you look on their website, there's probably a form for revenue from illegal activity reporting form number 705/21, and you fill it out and they tell you how much tax you owe on whatever all the ransoms you've been collecting or whatever. Anyways, sorry, John, who knows what'll happen next. Someone went after Trickbot. So Trickbot, if you're not familiar with that one, and you know me, I love all these like bot scripts and things. Trickbot uses config files. So basically what they do is Trickbot infections occur, and you get Trickbots on systems that you have, and they just kind of sit there. They don't do a lot because all these botnets are designed so that they do something all at once. So, you slowly take over the world with your botnet, and then when you want to run this giant denial of service or whatever, you can actually push that out. Well, Trickbot actually gets a config file regularly. So they push this out, and Trickbots check in with a command and control server periodically, and they push out new config files. Well, somebody pushed out a fake one. So somebody pushed out fake instructions for the botnet. And so basically what they did was they set the botnet's IP address to 127.0.0.1, which is the loopback. So this update came out, tells all the bots to go ahead and refer in the future to 127.0.0.1. So now they're not going to be able to get any more updates, which means that caused a big mess for, evil Trickbot people. Okay, so the Trickbot, those went off, and this was from Intel 471 was reporting on this. So apparently after the config was pushed out, though, then the central Trickbot controllers all stopped responding to bot requests as well, because there's people that monitor these things. And, so the conclusion of this article was that someone is attacking Trickbot, and they were using a multi-part attack to attempt to disrupt the operations of, Trickbot worldwide. So, I'm sure that their legal team will have a response to that, as we've seen everybody develop into actual businesses. And I know Jason is going to talk about the OFAC story, and so I'm going to leave it in suspense so that you can wait and hear about it there. But a very interesting story about that we'll hear about in a little bit from him, and I'm waiting on my writing about. I wrote a whole bunch of stuff about that. Oh boy, did I write a lot of stuff about that. Oh my God, I was going on and on and on. I was ranting. I mean, there's a part there where I throw my drink at the wall, and there's where I was going to say you can't handle the truth and all that kind of stuff, and lawyers, and bang on the table with my shoe, and oh wow, I'm tearing off my shirt in a rage. So we're going to see if Jason, when he talks about the story, can fulfill the sheer level of frustration I was prepared to demonstrate. And Alex Jones level of screaming at clouds kind of thing. Why it's still going. All right, finally I got past that. Okay. An Iranian group is actively targeting zero logon vulnerabilities. Muddy Water or Static Kitten, so all these in Iran are called something Kitten, but Static Kitten primarily has in the past focused on Middle Eastern regions and is highly active, according to the report. The group actually started up around 2017, or at least people started noticing around 2017. If you aren't familiar with this, the zero logon, net logon vulnerability, which we have talked about numerous times on the show before, allows attackers to get remote control of domain controllers, which of course means they can reset the domain controller password and get a domain admin account. And, basically, we've talked about that quite a bit. Microsoft did release patches for this in August 2020, and they announced they would release an enforcement patch in February 2021. Which I presume to mean they will force you to somehow install the patch for this, but they're not going to do that until next year sometime. Microsoft also announced that the Defender for Identity and Microsoft 365 Defender, so the first one is an Azure product, and 365 Defender is a local product, are both now detecting this attack. So people that are attempting to run net logon, zero logon attacks against you will be detected. But if you haven't patched anywhere, you should probably get patched. If you're in the Middle East, you probably should patch because, Static Kitten is out there. When we return, Jason Wood will talk about this OFAC thing and how you could get steep fines if you, pay up. Hang around.
The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
In high school, he was voted most likely to use Linux in an inappropriate manner. He is, of course, Jason Wood. Hey, Jason.
Hey. I don't think I know Linux wasn't a thing when I was in high school.
Oh, cool. Well, but they were seeing the future.
It was still a few more years away.
Okay, well, free BSD then.
There you go.
Yeah, which everybody thought was something dirty.
Hey, I love FreeBSD. That's where I learned.
I love FreeBSD. Yeah, I did all kinds of stuff with that.
So
I mean,
Doug,
all kinds of stuff.
Oh, geez. So, Doug, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you. I don't know if I have enough rage for you here, but we'll see how this goes. Last week, I was talking about ransomware again, because I deal with a lot of it, and these articles are kind of interesting sometimes. And I made a comment that basically the ransomware operators were going to continue their operations as long as people keep getting paid out. And then Friday last week, the U.S. Department of Treasury's OFAC office, which is the Office of Foreign Assets Control, released this advisory about the risks of paying out ransoms to e-crime operators or ransomware operation groups that have fallen under U.S. sanctions. Now, if you're not familiar with OFAC, again, Office of Foreign Assets and Control, this is something you may have observed when you were opening up a mortgage. It's you might have gotten a form you had to sign to say, hey, we're authorizing the mortgage company or the broker or whatever to go do a lookup on the OFAC list to see if we have some kind of hit for terrorism or things like that, or anybody who's been sanctioned. The idea behind this is the U.S. government tracks any groups that are sanctioned, who they are, or individuals who've been sanctioned, and then prohibits any kinds of financial transactions or business dealings with them. And there are a lot of regulations out there about if you're going to do X type of transaction, you need to do a lookup on the OFAC list to make sure that this person isn't sanctioned. And so that's what we're talking about here. And the problem is for us in cybersecurity is there are a number of ransomware operators that are on the OFAC list, that they've been sanctioned by it. If you look at the article in the show notes by Brian Krebs, talks about the Lazarus Group in North Korea, I'm going to screw this name up, Evgeny Bogachev, who's developer of CryptoLocker, and Evil Corp, which is a Russian cyber criminals group. All of those are underneath sanctions by the United States government and are listed with the OFAC office. Probably more beyond that. And so if we get ransomed as the victims, we are essentially potentially subject to penalties by the U.S. government if we pay out to one of these groups. And this is really difficult because they keep talking about having a nexus. If it's a Lazarus Group nexus or Evil Corp nexus, basically anything kind of looks like it might be crossover with their infrastructure, their techniques or tools or anything like that. puts them on the likelihood that you've been ransomed by somebody who's underneath sanctions. So we get kind of a double whammy here, because not only do we have our systems locked up and we have the desire to pay out, or our organizations rather, businesses we work for, have the desire to pay out, maybe to get back into business quickly because we don't have good backups, or to prevent some of these groups from releasing information that they stole and are now going to, leak this data out, as to apply pressure to us to cause us to pay up. If we do that, then we can be sanctioned or fined by the U.S. Department of Treasury under this regulation. The maximum penalty associated with this is up to $20 million for violations. Where is that going to fall out? Well, who knows? It's really just up to whoever decides to hit you with this on that side of things in the Treasury Department. Here are some problems with this, and I imagine this is where Doug got a little excited. One, attribution is not easy. How do you know that you are talking to the Lazarus Group or Evil Corp or Mr. Bogachev? We probably don't. It's not like the ransom note comes with instructions on making the check payable to Evil Corp or something like that. So it's really a bit of a problem for us if we are victims of this to try and avoid this type of issue. Now, I will say, from reading the PDF, which I have the link inside of the show notes to the release itself, OFAC is saying that, hey, if you have been ransomed, and if there's any possibility that it might be a sanctioned group, which means you probably ought to check anyhow, they want you to contact them and facilitate looking that up to see, share some information with them to see if you are at risk of running afoul of this. So that gives you at least some mechanism to deal with this. In fact, in the article quoted by Brian Krebs, the first show link note that I have in the link that I have in the show notes, Fabian Warsar, the CTO at Emisoft, a cybersecurity company, said in his experience, cyber insurance companies, for example, and the OFAC office are routinely talking to each other before they issue some kind of payout to the operators as they're negotiating that. So, it seems like some of this is already happening behind the scenes. I had no idea that cyber insurance companies were already doing this. And it does look like in the verbiage in here that the OFAC is particularly interested in financial institutions, incident response teams, insurance companies, or anyone who is helping to facilitate the payment. So perhaps the victim themselves is not exactly who they're after, but still, I would be very concerned if I was in this situation. The last thing you want to do is get hit with a ransom for $750,000, pay it out, and then have the Department of Treasury come to you and say, "Oh, that was a sanctioned group. Here's your $2 million fine on top of that," or whatever it is they decide to hit you with. So you definitely, if you're in this situation, make sure you're going down the path to check this out. As the article about John McAfee points out, the U.S. Department of Treasury has a long memory, and they definitely want to get their money or avoid other people that they don't want to get money. So we want to make sure we're taking care here. Apparently, there is some kind. If you're working with OFAC and stuff like that, you can, in the negotiations with them, get some kind of special dispensation in writing to make a payout. Seems a little weird to me, but this is just some of the things that we're dealing with here on the front of dealing with ransomware operations and e-crime actors. So make sure you are, whoever you're talking with or you are engaged to help you deal with things like this, is prepared and has the contacts already to make the appropriate communications happen and prevent yourself from getting hit with some kind of civil fine after you already got robbed with a ransom.
Yeah, I mean, I think my rant on that is basically what got me. I hate these kind of overreaches where I feel like now here's an office that doesn't have to do any due process and they can just sort of target people. And the people who don't get targeted are big entities that are sitting there, that have friends, they have lobbyists, they have people down there. So if an individual like me that's a consultant goes out there and you have a client and they call you this afternoon and go, we got ransomware, what should we do? We're screwed. They're going to release all this private data onto the internet tomorrow. We think this is going to be really, really bad. Should we pay up? And I say, yeah, probably so. I could literally be then also fined by this office because I don't happen to have like a dozen lawyers on the ground in D.C. that I can call this afternoon and say, hey, could you get a golf game together this evening with the guys over at OFAC so that you can work out my special dispensation so I can make a recommendation to my client? And considering that ransomware affects everyone from big companies to small companies, it's just one of those things that really bugs me because it just immediately turns into this, well, they can go after whoever they want to go after. And they won't be going after people that have got a dozen lawyers on the ground in D.C. They'll be going after people that they go, oh, we don't like those guys, so let's go burn them down. There's all these political ramifications and stuff like that. I mean, I don't want to be giving money to North Korea either, but, I sure hate the idea that I tell my client to do what's best for their business, and then I get turned around and get a big, nasty fine from some office I've never even heard of in D.C. going, oh, yeah, you owe $20 million because you recommended they pay a fine. And it's like, and you know who they're going to blame. The company's going to go, hey, we were just doing what the consultant told us to do. I mean, the consultant
Absolutely.
came in, and, you're going to have to go after him, and they can still go after them and go, hey, ignorance is no excuse for the law. That I know that speed limit sign was covered up, but you were still speeding.
And they did make a comment in here that, ignorant, knowingly or unknowingly who pays out to this. So they really don't care if you didn't know that, or it had no way of really knowing that it was going to Lazarus Group. And this is just under regulations that, regulatory authority given to the U.S. Department of Treasury. I mean, yeah, it's...
And all that was about anti-terrorism
You're going to have to lawyer up hardcore if you get caught up.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know if you'll win because, they've got all these rules in place and they can just come at you and go, okay, you're going to pay a big fine. So I don't like that kind of overreach. There ought to be some kind of due process on that. They ought to have to prove that you did it with, willful intent or whatever. And I believe me, I'm no fan of terrorism. So I'm fine with them going after that. But I don't really like this, which is not terrorism necessarily. It's just overreach. Anyway, got on my nerves. I was ready to get all worked up about it. I had a sponge here to wipe the sweat off my face when I was,
And this is what happens when I get to the show notes before the show and steal.
I was really glad you took that story. I thought that was a story that was worthy of you, so I'm glad that you took that one. All right. Thanks, Jason. And finally, suck it, Richard Feynman. Scientists at the University of Arkansas refuted one of the main assertions by Dr. Feynman that Brownian motion cannot do work. The team found that Brownian motion of graphene, which is an expensive little thing, at room temperature could actually induce an alternating current. And all this is based on the idea. So I don't know if you've ever had this thought when you're taking physics or whatever, but it's like a common question in intro physics classes, is that atoms are constantly moving, which is called Brownian motion. And, well, if something's constantly moving, isn't there a way we could capture that movement and turn it into steam or something? And, of course, that is where Maxwell's demon and the second law of thermodynamics come into play. And Feynman basically said, no, you can't do that. It violates all that's holy. And he's still right. So I'm just kidding about that part. But I mean, at the same time, if you could make those atoms do something constructive with their energy, well, now you can. So I know you think this is about Rick Sanchez's car battery. I do. I mean, I know. If you haven't seen that episode of Rick and Morty, well, then you don't get any of that. But you could be right. But this is for all you physics and double E types. So if Maxwell's demon, capacitors, and diodes make you smile, well, this is an article that you probably want to read. But if the team can figure out then how to convert this to DC and store it on a capacitor, Well, now you got little tiny atoms in graphene at room temperature wiggling, and that wiggling is creating AC current, which is converted to DC current and put in a capacitor. You could actually replace low-power batteries with this tool. So it's something that's interesting to read if you're interested in such things. And that's the news for now in the time of plague. I'm Doug White. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Security Weekly News. I'll be back Friday with the Security Weekly News wrap-up. Be safe out there.